You know, flying these days has been arguably safer than it's ever been, but the irony is we're having all these near misses or near collisions, and I'm wondering, did we have this perhaps in the past and just didn't recognize it, or are we tracking it better? And why do we see an uptick in these incidents?
Thanks, Phil. It's a very timely question, and you know, recently that's the reason why FAA has the Safety Summit. After the pandemic, certainly there's a growth in aviation sector. As you just heard, it's not only in US, across the world. Globally, we are looking at a huge demand in passenger planes which were parked. They are being put into services again, as well as there's a demand for pilots and air traffic controllers. Now, all these factors after the pandemic, these are all contributing to a awareness into the safety issues that airlines or some of the incidents that recently have occurred.
I would imagine that the pilots' unions, the airline companies, and the regulators are all on the same page when it comes to making travel safer. Are there any sticking points, perhaps, that they need to agree on? I mean, they're on the same page, right?
Absolutely, Phil. You know, all the stakeholders, whether it's pilots, air traffic controllers, cabin crew, the ground operators, OEMs, they are all on the same page. Safety is paramount. In aviation industry, we go with the safety and the risk management as a number one issue.
Right. So my follow-up with that, though, is if they're on the same page, how come some of the recommendations that was mentioned by the chair earlier of the NTSB not made? I mean, maybe it's a technicality, but it just seems to me if she's bringing it up, the chair is that it seems serious enough that these fixes or upgrades should have already been made.
Yep. So there are, you know, she's absolutely right. There are some areas that NTSB has identified that FAA and the other regulators are working on. You also have to understand that the technology changes very fast. The uncertainty is always there. And that's where FAA and others are on top of it, making sure the changes they are, you know, some recommendations they are some long time ago, they have to be reworked and readapted in a way that meets the current environment.
And when you talk about airline safety, we often look at Europe and Asia and the US, and you can't help but, I guess, compare. There's been a number of accidents in the past, and people often say, well, one country is safer than another, and I'm just curious, in your expert opinion, is that true, that there are safer airlines or points of destination that you go to or leave from that are safer than others?
Phil, you know, all globally, the regulations are very similar. When you look at it, we all aviation industry work very closely with ICAO, FAA, EASA, all the regulators around the world. As you just heard in the Singapore, the summit that has happened, all the issues were something similar that you see it in either in US or Europe. The pilot shortages, the controllers, training issues, the growth in aviation sector. So overall, but we think globally, aviation sector is pretty safe and secure. And in US, as you can see, we do a lot of work as to what we just did with the predictive analysis for the safety reforms within the Safety Summit. You know, FAA came up with only 4 or 5 very good points, the basic points, making sure the communication is there. There's a sterilized deck when during the flight. And then there are also issues related to the training and bringing in the safety management system.
Right, and I was actually going to ask you about that, because post-COVID, we've seen the shortage of pilots that you mentioned, but we have a lot of new pilots and new staff that are coming on these airlines, and I fly quite a bit, and I've heard plenty of stories of things gone wrong from the airline staff, and I'm curious, are we seeing the same level of importance being placed on training as we did prior to COVID? Because it seems to me like even when we're taxiing, I mean, I feel like we're faster on the tarmac, just taxiing around than we, and I have no way to know it because I'm not in the pilot's seat, but there are very small things that I notice as a passenger.
As such, there are no changes, and actually it's become very strenuous to make sure the pilot training and the air traffic controllers go through the same strenuous training that was being in the past. Actually, with the shortages, that doesn't mean that we have cut down any of the ways to accelerate their training part. No, that's not the case.
Right.
The thing is, as we said, communication is the key. The pilots have to ensure they're the last line of defense. Pilots are the last line, and they have to communicate with the controllers and the controllers with the pilots in such a manner that it's safe.
Sandeep, next time we have you on, I'm going to ask you to fix all the delays so that we don't have the same delay chaos we did last summer. But I fear that we're going to have a whole nother session of this. Appreciate your analysis on airline safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.